Are you really struggling to grasp European Portuguese? Don't worry, you are not the only one. It is hard. So hard, in fact, in my personal opinion as a language teacher, I think it is harder than Spanish and Brazilian Portuguese. But if you are relocating to Portugal, you have got to put in the effort into learning because it's going to make your life so much easier. You can't get by with Spanish, and people will be pretty annoyed if you try. And although it's the same language, the way Portuguese is spoken in Brazil is very different, and you will be stuck when trying to understand locals in Portugal. There is a reason why Portuguese shows get dubbed or even have subtitles in Brazil. Even the Brazilians find it hard, so please don't beat yourself up. So don't take the easy way out. In today's video, I'm going to break down the things that you should be looking for that make European Portuguese so hard to make your journey learning this language easier. So if you need this video and my help today, give this video a like and hit subscribe if you haven't already. If you are new to the channel, seja bem-vindo. My name is Liz and I help people who are relocating or retiring to Portugal to go from saying their very first words up to having their first conversation with native speakers. So stick around if that is what you're looking to achieve. So let's start with the first reason that European Portuguese is harder than both Spanish and Brazilian Portuguese. Have you ever thought that Portuguese kind of swallow their words? That's because they use a lot of closed vowels. Let's take the letter E for example. As well as an open E sound, E, they use a lot of the closed E sound, okay? So if we take the word perfecto in Spanish, you can hear how the E and the O is nice and open. Even in Brazilian Portuguese, you would say perfeito. So you can hear how that E is more open. But in Portugal, it will sound like this, perfeito. Can you hear how the and the O are much more closed down? You'll hear this occurring most obviously in words that end in E. So in Spanish, if we alter the word slightly to make it perfectly, you would say perfectamente with an E at the end. In Brazilian Portuguese, perfeitamente. So again, we're still exaggerating that E at the end. But in Portugal, it will sound like this, perfeitamente. You can hear how that E is almost swallowed at the end there. That's because it's a closed E. This is really tricky to get right, and one of the reasons that when you hear Portuguese in Portugal, it can be difficult to pick out the words being said. In my recent interview with my student Alexia, she talked about this. She did have a basic understanding of Brazilian Portuguese before moving here, but when she arrived and heard what it was like, she said, oh wow, yeah, this is totally different. I'll link that interview below if you want to hear more about her experience of moving here from the US and how she got to a conversational level so fast. Another very tricky sound to mimic in Portuguese, and another reason why it is so difficult, is the nasal sound. So what is a nasal sound? Well, to put it simply, when we say vowels normally, the air is only coming up through our throat, but when we nasalize a vowel, the air is going to come through our nose as well. So A will become an, E will become E, okay? It's a little bit tricky to do. So what are some examples? The word for sister, irmã. Can you hear how nasal that A is at the end? Or the word for tomorrow, amanhã. It's not just words that have this accent, this tilde, or I call it the worm on top, that also have the nasal sound. It's also words ending in M. I have talked about this in other videos. So we shouldn't be saying bom dia, we should be saying bom dia, because that M at the end of that word signals to me that I have to nasalize the vowel that goes before it. Head exploding? Yeah, I'm not surprised. That's a reason why this language is so hard. This is something that particularly native English speakers, which are the majority of my students, really struggle with. And I do go into a lot of detail on how to master this sound in my free lesson for beginners, which I will link in the description. If you are just getting started with European Portuguese and need help, this is going to be so beneficial. You will feel so much more confident after just 60 minutes. So go ahead and check that out. The link to register is in the description. Now, still on the track of the way that Portuguese is spoken, have you noticed that the Portuguese often blend words together, cut words and sounds out completely? Yeah, no wonder it's difficult to hear what's being said. Well, there is actually a reason for this. Portuguese is what we call a stress-timed language. This means that we stress words at regular intervals instead of stressing every single syllable. I go into lots of detail on that in this video, but essentially it's another reason why, to the untrained ear, European Portuguese can sound a bit waffly. Spanish, on the other hand, is syllable timed. We do stress every syllable, so it's easier to hear entire words. So let's compare a couple of sentences in Spanish and Portuguese again. ¿Cómo te llamas? Me llamo María. ¿Cómo te llamas? Chamo María. Can you hear how in the Spanish sentence all of the syllables were stressed, but in the Portuguese sentence there was some stress and some not stressed, and those ones that are not stressed are much harder to hear. Hopefully you can hear those closed vowels that we were talking about in the Portuguese sentence and hear that the Spanish sentence sounds much clearer because they stress every syllable. In Brazil, this sentence would probably look a little bit different. It would have different wording. You might say something like, "Qual é o seu nome?" O meu nome é Maria. Now, just by the way I said nome there and stressed the ending, you can see that Brazilian Portuguese is closer to Spanish in this respect. We can't say that it's a syllable timed language because it's still Portuguese, so it is still stress timed. But as Portuguese evolved differently in Brazil, we can say that it moved closer to a syllable timed language if we think of it as a spectrum. Fascinating, right? I have done several in-depth videos on more differences between Spanish and Brazilian and European Portuguese, so I'll link those in the description and you can watch those if you're curious to learn more about this. There is so much to learn, it's so interesting. So don't be put off, you can master this beautiful language if you understand these fundamentals of how the language works. We cover this and so much more in my free lesson for beginners, which you should go and sign up for now if you've been finding it hard to get started and want to reach a conversational level fast. You'll also get all the info on how to join me inside the Portuguese Pro program, where I help people go from saying their very first words up to having their first conversations with native speakers. I would love to help you out, so I hope to see you there. I'll be back next week with more tips and tutorials to improve your confidence and conversation skills in Portuguese, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a thing. Ciao for now.